Hi, everyone. It is Marilyn Alori, and welcome to Who Can It Be Now? I have a really special guest today, Alisa DiLorenzo. And I want to tell you a little bit about Alisa before we go into it. I know her husband, Tony, and they have this incredible business called One Extraordinary Marriage. And Alisa is doing this amazing membership called Bold Wives Club that I think is so needed right now. So, as you know, when I interview someone, I never get a bio. I usually like to get to know the person organically on the call. And I know her husband, but I don't know her very well. I met her once and she kind of blew me away. I had a little bit of a girl crush, I have to be honest. When she was sharing, she was teaching me something about Chat GPT, and I thought it was really cool. So I'm going to turn it over to Alisa right now. We're going to talk about her and about how important it is right now for women who are in this stage of like the 50s when their kids are leaving the nest. I have so many clients like this, and what their life is like after their kids go off to school. Alisa is an expert in this area, and how her program, Bold Wives Club, really supports this change in your life right now. So Alisa, thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, Marilyn, it is a pleasure. Again, Tony. I know you through Tony, my husband, and so us being able to have this conversation super special.
And I said your name right, correct?
You did, which means you either practice or you just get pronunciation from the get-go, because that
No,
doesn't.
I asked Tony. Because I kept calling you Alyssa, and I was like, Alisa. So I want to start out with, because you have a super successful podcast. I think it's like number one or number in the first top 10. You do, right?
We do, yeah, the One Extraordinary Marriage show. We actually started that. Look at the calendar; it's about 14 and a half years ago.
Wow. So you guys were doing podcasting when podcasting was just like,
It was probably 3 or 4 years old, but most people didn't know what a podcast was. And you tell people you had a podcast and they just kind of look at you like, what?
yeah,
Oh,
what's that?
that's nice, but I don't know what that is. Right.
And
And
go
we
ahead.
started telling our story. We
Yeah,
were
tell
hardcore.
it, because I want people to know how this came about, because it wasn't like you were both doing this business, like we're going to go do this one extraordinary marriage, and that leads into Bold Wives Club. So yes.
Yeah. I wish it was that aha moment where, oh, let's just do a podcast because that'll be fun and everybody's doing podcasts, which is a little bit more of what happens today. It was really, all those years ago, Tony and I, about 16 years ago, were not in a great place in our marriage.
Mhm.
And we were in this place where we couldn't find resources, right? We were struggling in our own marriage. Our kids were 2 and 5. We were stuck, and divorce was actually a serious consideration. It was a conversation that was happening. And my husband is a visionary. He was a visionary all the way back then too, and he's the one of the big ideas. And he's like, hey, what if we did this 60-day sex challenge? And I looked at him and I'm like, our kids are 2 and 5. There's no way I'm like, we're not having sex. I don't want to have, like, no. We are not doing this. This is not a good idea. And then the next day I have my literal come to Jesus moment where this thought popped through my head where it was like, if you're not willing to try to see what will happen if you put your marriage first, then your marriage probably is over. Like I was literally, Marilyn, basket full of laundry in my garage. And
Yeah.
that's the thought that goes through my head. And so Tony comes home. I say yes. We end up completing 40 out of 60 in this 2-month period, and literally at year 11 transformed our marriage.
Wow.
And we just thought, okay, well, we're good, we're done, whatever. We were involved with a church at the time here in San Diego, and they said, well, will you speak at our marriage conference? Just share a little bit about what that journey looked like. And so we did, and people were like, oh my gosh, like, who does that kind of thing, right? And then the next day somebody asked us, well, what's next?
Mm.
And Tony and I looked at each other. I'm like, there is no next. Like, I got wife of the year. We're good. I don't need to have a next. And he's like, well, let's just talk to a business coach. Right. And so we hop into this conversation with a business coach. He's like, well, you should start a blog. Blogging 14, 15 years ago was really hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
And with a topic like marriage, there are so many nuances people could read into it. It was actually causing more fights between Tony and I
Mm.
than being a positive in our life. And another coach recommended podcasting to Tony. And so he bought the equipment, and it sat in our hallway for 3 months. And then I got really mad and said, are we going to do something with this? Or is that the most expensive hallway piece of junk that we've ever bought? And so January of 2010, we sat behind the microphones for the first time in our garage in San Diego and recorded episode 1. And I will tell you, Marilyn, I didn't think we were going to do more than 5 episodes, maybe 10. I was like, this is, as a wife, I was like, this is going to be the thing where I humor him, like, okay, we've done it.
Mhm.
Hooray, that little fun thing is over. And then between episode 3 and 4, we got a message, a very long message from somebody that I went to high school with. And she said, who are you and why are you doing this? What's your story? And it was much longer. You could, like, I look back now and I can read through the pain and all this kind of stuff. But we recorded episode 4 and we laid it all out on the line and said, we've dealt with pornography, we've dealt with child loss, we've dealt with death of a child, and we will never get behind these microphones and be anything less than open, honest, and transparent with our audience. And episode 4 is really what catapulted us into where we are today.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. So you didn't even know where it was going to go. You didn't even think it was going to go anywhere. And then all of a sudden you're just on this journey with it.
Mm-hmm.
And how did that feel to you? How did that feel to you as a couple? And how did it feel to you personally to be in that moment of like, this is who we are? Like, that's a real wake up moment.
Yeah, I will tell you, when we got the message again from this gal, Tony had the flu, so he actually thought he was dying. I like go running into the bedroom. I'm like crying because it felt so critical and, just hard. I didn't know that people were going to be critical of us putting our lives out there. And I remember him looking at me, he's like, I'm dying of the flu. Like, this is not going to be a thing tomorrow, so just let it go. But he obviously survived. But recording episode 4 and everything we've done since then, it was drawing a line in the sand of
Mm.
saying, we couldn't find the marriage resources that we needed. We couldn't find couples getting real and raw talking about marriage. And so we said, you know what, we're going to be that couple. We don't know where it's going to take us. There was no business plan when we got started. There was no, we're going to write, 10 books. There was none of that. It was, we're just going to have a conversation once a week. And there were times definitely where it's felt very vulnerable because we've shared some
Yeah.
really big hurts in our marriage. There were times that, we have cried with our audience on the air. We have, Tony and I laugh, we get angry, like we share it all because we realized in that moment that we had an opportunity to really pull back the curtains on a marriage and be in a place where, everybody wants to have these conversations, but they don't know how. And so if they can hear a couple having a conversation, it will make it easier for them to do so as well.
Well, it also helps them not feel alone, which I think is so important.
Yeah.
Everybody has this facade up of what's going on, and you're showing the truth, which is amazing.
Well, and we've seen, so you got to think 14, 15 years ago where social media was then compared to where it is now. I mean, back then we were pretty much like Facebook, Twitter, like that's where it was. And so, in the last 14, 15 years, you've seen the proliferation of all of the platforms that are visual, right? Like Instagram, TikTok, Snap, like where somebody will present an image,
Yeah.
but you don't know what's happening behind the scenes. And so I mean, to this day, we tell our audience, we're not perfect. We'll never get behind the microphones and be like, hey, we're Tony and Alisa DiLorenzo, and we've got it all figured out. And here's how you have a perfect marriage.
Yeah.
The show is called One Extraordinary Marriage because we want to equip couples with tools and strategies to create their own extraordinary marriage, not to be clones of us, but to be extraordinary in their own relationship.
How long are you married now, the two of you?
So this year we will celebrate 28 years.
Oh my goodness.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness. I want to talk about, because you're actually in a big change in your own personal life right now too, because your youngest just graduated high school.
Yes.
So before we do that, because I do want to talk about that, I want to talk briefly about the books that you have as well, because
Yeah.
there is a lot of great resources. And I want people to understand, I love your honesty and your vulnerable approach to things, because I'm really tired of people not telling the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And we need the truth. We need to, for me personally, I need to not feel alone. I need to know that you suffered and struggled too and
Yes.
got through it, because that inspires me in my suffering and struggling moment.
100%.
So when
100%.
did the books come and everything?
So we wrote our first book. Oh my gosh, it was 2000. 12, like I'm now it's like so far back into the archives. Um, yeah, I think that would have been like end of 2011, beginning of 2012. And again, somebody's like, write a book. And we're like, okay, we'll write a book. And I tell everybody now, I'm like, writing a book is like having a baby. It sounds like you have so much fun starting the idea, like it's so cool. And then you have this like middle period where you're like, this is just drudgery.
Yeah.
And then you get to the point where you're like, oh my gosh, this book is about to be published. Like it's coming. Like it's going to be here. Like, what do I do with this thing? And so we wrote the first book. I don't know. We probably sold initially like 10 copies, friends and family. And we're like, what do we do now? And we just kept refining our message. I mean, I think that's one of those growth opportunities where when you keep talking about a subject, when you keep learning about a subject, like you grow. And that's what led to the other books. We've written books on a 7-day sex challenge, on being able to ask and answer questions. We have a book called Connect Like You Did When You First Met, 101 Proven Questions for Couples. I've written a devotional, but everything really shifted in November of 21 when we released the 6 Pillars of Intimacy, The Secret to an Extraordinary Marriage.
Mm.
Because this was the book that really had like taken everything that we had learned prior and put it into a framework, Marilyn, that couples could hold on to. It gave them vocabulary. It's simple. It's, in my mind, I wrote it as if I was like sitting across from somebody having a cup of coffee, talking about these concepts so that you could just pick it up and be like, oh, I get it.
Mm-hmm.
And now we've got language and I can talk to my husband. I can talk to my wife. We've got action items. I didn't just want, there's so many theoretical books on marriage. I wanted a book that somebody could pick up and be like, I can do something with this.
Yeah.
We're not alone. They've had their trials and tribulations just like we have, and they're making it to the other side. And that was really the heart behind the book.
Yeah, it's 6 Pillars of Intimacy, and I've actually had a couple of clients buy it, and they have loved it because they were in trouble times with their marriage, and they really said that the 6 pillars helped them get through it, which is
Oh,
amazing. So
I
now you have others. I'm sorry, you wanted to say something.
no, I just want to say I appreciate hearing that.
So now you have other 6 pillar books, and
Mhm.
one that you're getting ready to write that actually I think coincides with Bold Wives Club.
Yes, there's so much going on in our lives, right? You just mentioned our daughter just graduated from high school. We've got an older one who's going to be a junior transfer into a 4-year college this fall as well. And so really coming into this place of the 40s and 50s, there's
Mm.
a lot of transition that happens and not a lot of conversation around that. And so, looking at this empty nest season, I remember like starting to see it on the horizon and being like, well, what are we supposed to do? Like our entire lives raising kids has been kind of wrapped around them, their schedules. Like, who are we going to be when they graduate, when they're like going on and leading their own lives? And what does it look like to recognize where we are as women very specifically? And that's really kind of what birthed the Bold Wives Club, because I started to realize I'm like, I need a community of women that like want to go deeper in this season and recognize how powerful it is to step into it and to do so, to take the blinders off and the masks off and just be like, this is real and raw.
Yeah. So tell everybody what Bold Wives Club is, because Lisa and I were talking briefly beforehand, and I'm 58 and she's about to turn 50. And when you were describing it, I was like, oh my goodness, this is so needed in this world. Like, I almost want to put a pretend wedding band on and just come into the community because it is so needed. But please tell us about it.
Well, bold stands for brave, open-minded, loving, and decisive.
Oh,
And
beautiful.
I
Say that
started,
again because it's so good, Alisa.
yeah, absolutely. Brave is the B, O is open-minded, L is loving, and D is decisive. And all of that came from, we live here in San Diego. I was walking the beach one day thinking about what does it look like to gather up women in this season, right? To be in this place where, when our kids were little, somebody said this to me the other day, and I thought it was so spot on. When our kids were little, we had moms, mothers of preschoolers. There was a way to come together. It was a way to get that respite from, parenting the little ones all the time, form connection, get poured into all of that. But then our kids grow up, we go through all the craziness, our bodies start changing, our husbands are changing, the parent, like all of these different things are happening. It's like, where's the spot for us as wives, as for
Yeah.
women in that like late 40s to, early 60s, where it's just kind of like all of this stuff is happening. And so this woman said to me, she's like, when we were younger, we needed mops. Now we need Bold Wives Club. And that's really the heart behind this. Where can I create a space for women in this season between raising our kids, taking care of our parents,
Mhm.
loving our husbands, dealing with menopause and all the age related beauty of being an older woman, and a community that is supportive and encouraging and also has the coaching around these core characteristics.
And the core characteristics are the bold, the open-minded, loving, and decisive. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
So let's talk a little bit about this. So some of the women that are coming into Bold Wives Clubs, they are empty nesters.
Hmm.
Menopause really does. I mean, I went into menopause early. It really messes with your body, messes with sex, everything.
Yes.
So how are you addressing different issues in Bold Wives Clubs with these women to support them?
Well, it's not just what I do. I also bring in guest experts because as a woman, as a coach, I recognize I don't know. And at 50, I'm old, old enough to say I don't know everything about everything, and I'm not even going to pretend to. So bringing in experts who can really speak into that. I've brought in experts, around menopause, libido, hormones. We've had experts come in and just talk about anger, right? Because let's face it, when you're menopause or perimenopause anger is like
It's crazy.
it's like it just kind of comes out of nowhere,
It does.
and if you couple that with night sweats, like I've there were a few times before I even got on hormone replacement therapy where like I'm having the night sweats and Tony wants to cuddle, and he would get close to me and I like within a 6-inch window, and I remember one night, just like throwing his arm, and he must have thought like there was a dragon in bed with him because I'm just like, get away from me.
Yeah. Hot sweats are horrible.
Yeah, and so he woke up the next day and he's like, "You are an angry person and you need to do something." So I've brought in experts around that. One of the experts coming in shortly will be talking about like estate planning and
Oh,
even
good one.
looking through like whether it's, situations that we're dealing with our parents or our own lives. What does it look like to actually start to think about the topic that nobody wants to think about, death, and address it in a way that we feel really empowered, that we get to make the decisions that we're having. Case in point, my parents were just here from Puerto Rico. They hand me their wills on this most recent trip. And after they left, I started reading through it. I'm like, okay, I don't know what they're doing in Puerto Rico or who their attorney was, but I feel like nothing was covered.
Hmm.
And being able to have those conversations now as with a parent to say, okay, we've got some holes. We just need to fill this in, but bringing in an expert that will say, "Hey, Lisa, this is what you need to ask your parents." This is because if we don't know, then we as women can feel really helpless. We can feel really alone. And it's who do you ask?
Yeah.
You don't want to just necessarily go to Google or Yelp to get a review. I want to bring in my experts are all women that I trust, who I want to pour into and coach these other women to say, "Hey, here's how you go down this path. You don't have to do it by yourself."
Yeah. What's so great about that too is that for me personally, I would think like, this is something I'm not even thinking about. I don't even know how to get near it. The idea of having to Google it and try to figure this out and find the right person. And then you're bringing all these topics to the conversation,
Mhm.
things that they need to think that they may need to think about. It's so great that you have that going on in there. And it's so much more than just what's going on in the bedroom and stuff, even though I know you have a great webinar about that. So
Well, and that's really like so much of the marriage stuff will be the stuff that I tackle. It is the stuff that I tackle because I'm so comfortable talking about sexual intimacy, body changes, things like that. Tony and I have talked about lubes and positions and even as my own body is changing and our marriage is getting older, very comfortable there. But looking at all these other things, when a wife mentions something in one of our virtual meetings, I'm constantly taking notes and I'm like, who do I know
yeah.
that's how this whole thing with having an estate planning attorney came to be because we were having one of our meetings. Somebody mentioned, older parents not having all the, documents together. And then it became this conversation between a couple of the wives. And I looked at them, I said, why don't, why don't I just bring an estate planning attorney in to do this for all of us? And you could literally see the shoulders, Marilyn, all drop
Mhm.
because it was like, oh, I'll just be able to ask my questions, right? And even though the estate planning attorney will be from California and these women are all over the country, it becomes that first conversation. And for us women, sometimes it's just a matter of knowing the questions to ask,
Yep.
knowing, what type of professional should I be seeking out? Because like we said, with Google, there's just so much information. We get
Yeah.
overwhelmed and don't take action.
I also find in communities like that, somebody will ask a question you didn't even realize you had.
Mhm.
So you're always learning something because you're like, oh, wait, I do need to know that. And I
Mhm.
so in this age group, it's like the aging parents, Alzheimer's, there's caretaking. There's so much that does happen. And
Mhm.
it could be a very isolating journey. It could be a very scary journey. So I love that you talk about the community and what you, I know you want to say something that I would about what I just said.
Well, this idea of being sandwiched between our parents and our children.
Mm,
It, we all can see it as we're getting older, but when you suddenly are confronted with the realities of chronically ill, dementia, Alzheimer's, and you are being pulled in that direction. And even though you might have adult children, they still need parenting in
yeah.
some way, shape, or form. It's just not the day to day, like you've got to have sippy cups and Cheerios in the in the cabinet. And then, you're also looking at marriage, and everybody's like, I need this, I need that. And you're like, where's me? Where do I exist? And that's very much like being able to have those conversations. But that's why the L in bold exists. Like, how are we also loving ourselves and not getting lost in all of this?
You may have to go downstairs. Everybody knows I have a puppy. I'm going to take care of that right now.
Okay.
Okay. You talked about loving yourself, and I really want to talk about that because I'm finding, and I talk to a lot of women who are in these positions who we talked about it before we got on about how isolating it can be,
Mhm.
how you don't have the community. Like once I've noticed the kids fly the nest,
Yes.
they don't have the friends, they don't have the social life. There's a real emptiness, there's a vacancy.
Mhm.
And then there's so I want to talk about that, the community, but also I want you to go a little bit more about loving yourself, how Bold Wives Club helps them to love themselves, and then how the community can
Mhm.
lift you up. So if we could talk about that, that'd be great.
Absolutely. 100%. I love the word vacancy
Mm,
when the children grow up and grow out. Because it is, you're so used to your kids taking up space, their schedules taking up space. You are sitting on sidelines with other parents. And so that makes it easy. You're going to recitals, you're doing all of these other things. And your friends very much are the friends of, the parents of the kids that you're hanging out with. That can be that space. And so being in this place of, okay, I don't have my kids' friends anymore, or kids' friends' parents. And so stepping into, where do I find other women that I can talk to and be real? Because so many of the women that have come into the community, into the club, have shared, I know women, but I don't have those women that I can get real with.
yeah.
I don't have those women that, you know what, if I am having a hot flash and I want to talk hormone therapy, or, vaginal dryness is a thing, like, who, I'm not going to talk vaginal dryness with my girlfriends. But they'll come into, one of our meetings and they're like, Alisa, we need to talk about vaginal dryness. And I'm like, okay, let's talk lubricants. And it's safe, and it's, contained. And it's this place where it's like, oh, you're, on the East Coast and I'm on the West Coast, or you're up North and I'm in the South. And yet we all come together because I know that I can trust you. And that's cultivated because I very much, as part of the Bold Wives Club manifesto, like, no complaining. We're looking for solutions. We are not going to bash on our husbands, because there are plenty of other places where men are getting bashed, and it's not going to happen within this community. It's this place of, what are those actions? And one of the things I love is when these wives start to share ideas. You asked about loving ourselves. And when we get in that place of isolation, we can kind of get, in a routine. We can get into a place where we're not doing a whole lot for ourselves, and we just don't feel good about ourselves. And so hearing these wives share ideas about, you know what, I make spa day, like a
Mm.
once a month thing, or you know what, I'm going to, like, they might even post in the group, hey, I'm going to get my nails done. What color? Like, even just little things like what color.
Mhm.
And to have those girlfriends that, if you were going to get your nails done together, you'd be like, okay, well, I'm going to go red. I'm going to go pink. You'd have that. And even just sharing that type of conversation, like, what books are you reading? How are you moving your body? Like, these are all conversations and questions that are being discussed because it's the things that matter to us. Right. When we start to love ourselves again, love who we are with a few more wrinkles and a few more pounds and a few more grays. And we're like, yeah, but this is 50. I literally told someone this morning, I'm like, I'm going to be 50 on June 20th. I'm so excited for what the 50s are going to hold. And, and able to go, yeah, this is all me. I've earned every wrinkle. I've told my son, because he's much taller than I am, so he can look down and see if I, have a gray that's poking out. I'm like, you created at least half of those. But I'm good with it. I do color my hair. It's a vanity thing. I'm not ready to go fully gray yet. Um, that is my one vanity piece. But but I love doing that, and it makes me feel good. And actually being in a place where whatever you choose to do is celebrated,
Yeah.
because we as women, we're not celebrated nearly especially as we move into our 50s. We can lose that sense of celebration, that sense of accomplishment, that sense of appreciation. And so having cheerleaders within the community, having other women go, "It's a great idea," or "I hadn't thought about that," or "Thank you for sharing that," or "High five," or "I've got your back." We feel seen again. And I think that's such a big part of this, because a lot of women in this, like, 45 to 65 don't feel seen.
It's so true.
They just don't feel seen.
It's interesting to me because I remember my mother kind of sharing this with me about when you get older and men don't notice you as much, and people aren't holding the door, and just even different little things, and you don't get seen as much. You're not getting seen as much from your kids because you're not needed in the same way. There are different things that are happening, and I would imagine it leads to an identity crisis
Mhm.
because you're no longer that particular person. Yeah, speak about that.
Well, because you go from being mom
Mm,
to being someone, it's kinda like now like, you don't have your kids right around, and so it's like, well, now I'm not mom in the same way anymore. And I'm still daughter, if your parents are still living, but you might have, like, that daughter role might take on a bigger thing. We're still married, but we're both aging, right? And it's like, who am I? What do I like to do? This came to a head, Marilyn, for Tony and I earlier this year. This will be one of those, like, core memories, core conversations for Tony and I. We were at a Del Taco in Henderson, Nevada, right after our marriage conference that we were just attending, not speaking at. And Tony Tony had the courage to say, "You know what? We're not good.
mm,
You've lost your joy. You were drifting apart. Like, what is going on with you?" And I had to hop on a plane right after. And I remember sitting there, Maryland's, I flew standby. So I was like in a middle seat, scrunched between two people. And I remember thinking, this is where couples who have been married 20 plus years get divorced,
mm. Yep.
because they have that conversation and somebody doesn't take action. And I came right home, got off the plane. My son picked me up, got off the plane, got home, and I looked for an art class. I've never taken an art class. And I'm like, I need something creative. I'm going to go find an art class. And it was just enough to jumpstart finding myself again. Oh, I can be creative. I can do something by myself. I went to an art class on the day before Valentine's Day. Everyone else in the class was couples.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I just sat there and I'm like, you know what? I'm a 49-year-old woman willingly doing an art class by myself. I'm all good. I can own this. And I love the masterpiece that I created that night, because it was that reminder to me, you got the next 50 years.
Yeah.
You can do this.
That's that's great. That's so what I love about this, Elisa, with everything you've said, even with your business, there's these moments where you definitely hit a wall, where you have this like scary kind of feeling. It could be, life is shifting, life is changing, but it seems like even in your business, in your marriage, you're helping, you're finding the solution. You're finding the next thing to go to.
Mhm.
You're finding what you want to paint, put in the void.
Mhm. We can get so distracted by all the little things in our
Yes.
lives. Whether it's our phones, whether it's our jobs, whether it's, just having to, just the busyness. And it's easy to lose ourselves when all we are is busy. And sometimes we have to stop and just go, okay, who am I right now? Who do I want to become? When we were thinking about having babies and doing that kind of stuff, it was like, well, I want to be a mom. Okay, well, you have a baby and then you become a mom, and that's, at least in the immediacy, that's like an 18-year journey for each kid, right? Okay. And then it's like, well, now I'm not in that. Who do I want to be now? And I love having those conversations with women in this age group because for so many of them, they haven't thought about it. And when that gets unlocked and they start going, oh, like, I can be a wife that creates this extraordinary marriage. I can be a wife that steps into new interests and new hobbies. I can be a wife that starts making decisions again instead of just saying, honey, whatever you want to do, doesn't matter to me. It's fine. But no, like, boldly making a decision, just being like, this is what I want for dinner, and having it be okay. Like, all of a sudden, this sense of purpose and sense of self gets reignited in a woman. And it's a beautiful thing. It's an absolutely beautiful thing.
Well, that's why I think Bold Wives was important, because then not everybody is being asked that question. What do you want? What do you want now? You can have something else. I'm noticing you're not happy. Like, it's being able to have that conversation with other women, or seeing another woman ask themselves that, like in a community. I feel like it really helps you to flourish and grow and think of things. We keep saying this, that you'd have even thought of. Like, you were like going to an art class. Like, that's a big moment between your husband and you, and your solution. You were able to decide, like, let me go to an art class, and where that takes you. It's so great. So do
Mhm.
you address those types of things in this program with women?
Absolutely, because I do a combination throughout the course of the month where I have, 2 sessions a month that are really, focused on training. So we're talking about the characteristics, we're digging into challenges that wives face and that type of thing. And then I have 2 sessions, I call them my hot topics, right? Where it's like whatever, any wife can jump on. It's, all community. And like, what are you dealing with right now?
Mm,
And I'm still coaching in those moments, but it's also getting the collective wisdom
yeah.
of other wives, because again, I have a lot of knowledge around marriage. This has been Tony our lives for, gosh, a very long time now, 16, 17 years. Um, but stepping into this place of getting wisdom from other women, hearing them share their stories. Again, you've mentioned it a couple times here. It's so easy to get isolated.
Yeah.
And so when you hear, oh, well, so and so, she's been married 35 years and they went through it. And this gal over here, she's been married 22 years and they went through something similar. Okay, we're not, crazy. We're not, unusual. We're just another couple going through this. Let me ask them questions. Let me bring them into my inner circle and know that not only am I not alone, they've survived it.
Yeah.
This isn't going to like totally destroy us or be the death, of us. It's just like, oh, that's a hard season. Let's do something in that season.
I think it's so important, because when I used to do readings and stuff for people, I'd have so many women come to me like, should I end my marriage?
Mm,
And it's not a question you should be asking a reader, which is part of the reason why I don't do readings anymore, because it's such a important question, right? You're asking somebody else to make a decision for you. But many times what would come through in the reading was how unsatisfied the person felt about themselves, and
mm,
they had to fix that before they could fix the marriage. And I would imagine in Bold Wives Club, what's so beautiful about it is they're getting to hear those other, like, first of all, I'm not alone. This one went through it. This is what this person did. And it helped. Like, just even, I'm a single woman hearing your story about sandwiched between two people. I have the visual, and then I'm just going to take an art class, and that starts shifting things. That allows people to recognize that there's another way,
right, right. And
instead
that's
of like throwing everything away. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, no, no. That was exactly where I was going to go with that. Is that we've been so conditioned, I think specifically over like the last 10 years, to think that relationships are disposable. That,
Yeah.
that if I'm not happy, if it's not working, if it's too hard, then clearly you're the wrong person for me. Instead of, as I so often ask couples, I'm like, tell me your love story, right? Tell me how y'all got started.
Mhm.
Tell me where the detour happened, because there's always a detour, right? You don't end up, 15, 20, 30 years down the road. You loved each other once. Where was the detour? And let's get you back on the road, right? Let's turn this around. And sometimes it's, you know, when wives are in community and the beauty of that and through the group coaching is that there isn't just one way,
Yeah.
but there are multiple solutions. Oh, well, this wife tried this wife tried this. And I tell them, I'm like, don't just throw a smorgasbord of ideas out, pick one and commit to it, but also know you got other options
Yeah.
without just going to, it's been a great 20 years, 25 years. Thanks for the ride. I'm going to go just toss this. Because you still got to deal with you. Like, even if you toss the relationship, to your point, that dissatisfaction with self still has to be addressed.
Yeah. And I see so many people make decisions like that and they don't realize what's on the other side of it. And it's not as great as they think. So I
Mhm.
think it's really important to have these types of conversations to witness what other people have gone through so they can make a well-informed decision and
Mhm.
try to make things work as best they can. I love the fact that you have no complaining because you can't. I would love to know your reason for that. I'm not going to say my understanding of it. I think it's really important though.
Yes. Now, to clarify, this isn't to say that problems don't get brought up and discussed within the community. But I very much have seen, I've been a marriage coach for over 10 years now, and I very much have seen, like, when somebody just starts complaining and they're just, giving kind of looks like Santa Claus's list, but of all of the issues, complaints, they don't even pause, take a breath. It's just this, like, literally just spewing negativity.
Hmm.
And when that happens, there's no opportunity for solution there. There's no opportunity to actually go, okay, is this about the person or about the problem?
Hmm.
Complaining is usually about a person, right? I'm just going to complain and tell you all the things you're doing wrong. Whereas if you're talking about the problems, well, now we're dealing with something tangible. Is it your finances? Is it your lack of communication? Is it lack of sex? Whatever. Now we can go after finding solutions. And that's why for me it was so important, because I don't complain about Tony. I mean, we've had horrible seasons in our marriage, and that has always been one of those things where I'm like, okay, you know what? Here's what we're dealing with. But I think part of the reason we're still married is because I don't complain about him. I don't sit around with a group of women and like, oh my gosh, my husband, would you believe, every movie stereotype about a group of women. And it was so important to me, Marilyn, that the community that I started would have that same value, because I want men to still be appreciated.
Hmm.
I don't want it to be like it's only about women. It's only, wife power, I guess, would be the equivalent of that. Um, because marriage takes both of us. And if we see our men as just these negative, awful, infantile human beings, like, why would you? Why,
Yeah.
why, why would you want to be? I'm like, no. But if it's just like, hey, we've got a problem we need to address, well, then let's figure out how you're rolling it. Let's figure out how to equip him. Let's do both of that and bring that in.
Well, I also think it's what I love about that is it's taking responsibility for your place in it all.
Mhm.
Even if I just always see that I went to couples counseling briefly, and it was one of the most important things was to take responsibility for my experience in it and to be able to communicate that. Like, when you do this, I know it's not your intention, but this is how I feel because
Sure.
of, whatever. And I think that's so important. I also want to say something else, and I want to just dive in a tiny bit to Bold Wives Club so people can really understand how to learn more about it and stuff. But um, I'm really tired of the men bashing, period,
Mhm.
in times,
Mhm.
so I'm really glad to hear that. And I love the way you said it. It's about us coming together and talking about there's issues, but let's find solution
Yes.
instead of staying in the problem.
Mhm. Well, because problems just get to be rehearsed, right?
Yeah.
When we're complaining, we are just rehearsing all of this negativity. And, I'm sure you're aware with all the work that you've done that when when people are just rehearsing negativity, it impacts us. It impacts our bodies, it impacts our thoughts. You can't get away from it. Whereas
Mm-mm.
if you identify what a problem is and then you start looking for solutions, and even collaboratively within a community like Bold Wives Club, talking to other women about finding solutions, like we change internally. Our cells start to, operate differently when we're in this place of going, I'm looking for an answer. I'm trying to find a solution. I can identify that this is a problem. If it's a problem, that means there's got to be a solution somewhere, somehow, and I'm going to go after finding that. And now all of a sudden we're empowered. We've got this, positive energy to work towards it. And it shifts everything that we do.
I also think community is so important, Alisa, because I see it with so many people in my business where they're not in physical communities where they can have these conversations. Maybe there's, couples or friends, they can't really
Yeah.
talk about it. And they need these types of communities. And also, if you go out and you try something and it doesn't work, you need to be able to come back to a community and discuss it and have other people reflect back to you, maybe what else you can do.
Right. Right. Because we can get so blinders on, narrowly focused of going, okay, I read this on Google. This came on some marriage site. This is what I'm going to do. And it's going to work because it worked for these people. And then it doesn't. And you're like, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And to have other wives go, okay, I heard what you tried. But did you ask him this? Did you also add this in? Did you, there might just be a little nuance, or you might need to scrap that idea altogether and hear from another wife who's like, oh, yeah, yeah, that didn't work for us either. Try this.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh. And again, I think so often we women, I keep going to my shoulders. So often we women carry so much of our stress in our shoulders, and we can be like all up here and just tight and everything. And so when you can get into a place where you're hearing other solutions, you're hearing other ideas, and your shoulders drop, and you can take a deep breath for maybe the first time in a long time. And you're like, oh, okay, I can do this. And when we're in our 50s, I think we need more I can do this than shoulders up at our ear ball.
That is priceless because to be able to have that experience, to be able to go somewhere and have that, just dropping your shoulders, letting go,
Mhm,
knowing there's something out there, there's some solution, being heard, being seen.
mhm.
And I don't think enough women support each other the way women need to support each other, unfortunately.
That's, um, that's another aspect of this. We I think we spend a lot of our 20s and 30s and maybe even into our 40s in competition, whether it's for, in the career, chosen career, jobs, things like that. Like I've got to like one up, one up, one up, or even in parenting.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, well, my kid's doing this. Oh, really? Yeah. Well, so my little one is doing this. Or like we just went through this with the whole like college search and, oh, well, my kid got this many acceptance letters or my kid's going to this school. And we're always like, it's always a competition. Instead of taking all of that away and going, yeah, so we've all got kids. Or not every woman does, but a lot of the women in the community have kids. So they're kids. Great. We have husbands. Yes. We go on these kinds of trips. Sure. Let's just strip that all down because it's not the focus of the club and come back into this place where it's like, hey, how are you doing? How are you really doing? What are you faced with? We had one wife probably about a month ago now. She hopped on and just as everybody's popping on beginning of the session, and I'm like, hey, so how you doing? And she's like, she takes this really deep breath and she said, my mom died yesterday.
Oh,
And I just looked at her and I said, thank you so much for letting us know that being here
mm,
was important even in this season. Because if she hadn't been there, she just shot me a message later, hey, my mom, like, I wouldn't have thought anything of it. But it was this beautiful moment of, as the other wives were coming on, of just being able to acknowledge that. And even like I told her, I'm like, if you have to hop off, if this gets to be too, like, you do whatever is going to be best for you. But it was a beautiful moment to all these other wives to go, oh, being around community when life happens, and it will. And I don't have to be in competition. I don't have to keep this mask up of going, hey,
yeah.
it's a great day.
Mm.
She came in and she was just raw. And I remember sitting in that moment going, that's why. This is so important because if somebody can lose their mom one day and still find value and still find that this is important to show up and be surrounded by these other wives, then I'm accomplishing exactly what I want to accomplish. I'm pretty
Yeah,
convinced.
I lost my mother in November, and I can tell you that it's needed, that what you're
Mhm.
doing. And also she was going through Alzheimer's. I wasn't the caretaker. My brother was, but he was very difficult.
Mhm.
And being able to have a community of people that you can go into, of women, it feels like a tribe. It's what we're
That's a
missing.
great word. Yeah. Yeah.
And this is the way women would raise kids together, or in the olden days, or they would be together and they would help each other. And I loved looking at those. We don't see that anymore, those
Mhm.
cultures where the women, the aunts and the sisters and the grandmothers and the great
Mhm.
aunts,
Mhm.
and being surrounded. Like, I have a friend who's surrounded by that many women all the time growing up, and it was just so beautiful to hear the stories and to see the strength that
Mhm.
you draw from that.
Mhm. 100%. 100%. It's something like we're so connected by social media, by, our cell phones, by, all these different platforms. There's a lot of like digital electronic connection, but there isn't so much heart connection.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're really missing in today's day and age. And, you know, I can't solve the problems for everybody, but for wives in this midlife, which is exactly where I am. So I'm going after, my own, what I actually even need myself. Like I'm going after this and saying, hey, what happens if? What happens if we get to connect on a heart level? What happens if we can be real with women? What happens if, I'm dealing with something, I can get a question answered, or I can just show up and just kind of soak for an hour and just be like, that was like one wife told me recently, she's like, I make our meetings a priority because that is like my self-care hour
Yeah.
during just, and her husband's even like, go to the meeting. I've got dinner. I've got like, just go to your meeting because it matters to you. And I thought, self-care, like taking care of ourselves is being in community.
Yeah, I love that. But you also said something else, that is so important to me, is it's the heartfelt conversations, the truth.
Mhm.
They The dropping down of the veils and the facade and being able to be yourself
Yeah.
is so important, especially with other women. I find it. And I'm a woman's woman, and I think you're a woman's woman too.
Mhm.
Um, but I found, like, moving someplace where I don't know a lot of people, it's been an interesting experience for the first time in my life with the women here, and I've never had that experience because I usually gather women and bring them
Mm.
together.
Mhm.
And it might be an age thing. I think it's really important that we have this nurturing and this feminine connection
Yeah.
and the strength of women in numbers coming together and that support.
We need one another,
Yeah.
and we especially need one another when we are going through major life transitions. And midlife, because of all the shifting relational dynamics, because of all the shifts that are happening in our bodies, like all of that, it is I think outside of like those teen years when like hormones are raging and everything's happening there and you just feel like the whole world is upside down. I actually think midlife as I'm in this space is probably one of the most critical times in a woman's life, and it's just not being talked about.
No, I agree.
And so, you know, like so many of us do when we see that there's an absence, when there's a void, when there's a vacancy, it's like, what are we going to do about it? Well, if you see it, you got to do something about it. And
Which
that's really,
we're going to start wrapping up, but that was my main question. It's the question that's been on me. Take me to the moment when you decided to create Bold Wives Club, because you're so in this. I want to hear about that.
yeah. So it was, I mean, it might have been about like March, April last year. Um, we've, for the last 14, almost 15 years now, we've been doing One Extraordinary Marriage. We've been very focused on couples. And I knew I wanted to do something just with women. Right. So what is that? Yeah. And then because we're so close to the beach here, I find myself walking the beach a lot. And I remember having this moment on the beach, walking south towards Torrey Pines, if anybody knows the Del Mar, San Diego area, and just going for such a time as this. And really thinking about what does it look like to raise up women in my age? Like
Mhm.
that was the thing. I'm like, what am I facing? I'm facing kids graduating. It's just going to be Tony and I, major life transitions, hormones all over the place, just having a complete field day in my body. My parents getting older, Tony's mom getting older. Like all of these things were rattling around in my head. And I'm like, who am I talking to?
Mm.
Who am I talking to? And, I've been blessed to have some very good girlfriends that we just get real and raw, and I can do it, and I can talk about, challenges with kids or challenge. But I remember sitting even around with them after this walk on the beach going, what do women do that don't have us? What if you're in a small town? What if your relationships, just because of dynamics, have stayed at that superficial level? And even though you know a lot of people, you still don't have people that you're like, maybe they won't be comfortable if you ask the question. You won't be comfortable. It'll embarrass you. Like, what do we do? And I remember having this conversation with Tony, and he's like, well, what do you want to do? You see a problem. What are you going to, my sweet husband, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? I'm like, I don't know. He's like, well, he's so direct. He's like, figure it out. Right. And we started going through different iterations. And then another walk on the beach gave me the letters for bold, because I'm like, women's club. I don't know what I'm calling this thing. And then bold, literally just a stroke of inspiration. I'm like, bold. What does that mean? And then just thinking through, like, what could those letters represent? And so it's been a journey over a year. Started it the club as beta in August, September, and have just gone through some iterations, just kind of refining it. And I'm so excited right now because I know, I know what the club is supposed to be. And now it's just like, okay, let's get the word out. Let's let women know that there's a solution out there. There's an opportunity. There is something for them in midlife, because I don't want women to be lonely. It's too hard.
And is that what the club is supposed to be? Or is there more?
You know what? Given that we've done One Extraordinary Marriage for 14 years, I know that the club will iterate.
Yep.
So I don't ever say 100% set in stone what it is today is what it will be, 4, 5, 10 years down the road, because I know that I'm growing and changing. I know right now, as this community grows, this is where we're at right now. I am coaching these women. I am watching them, work with each other. I'm bringing in these guest experts. Like, this is the heartbeat of the community right now. And as we grow and change, I'm open to wherever the journey takes us. Because I know that and this has happened throughout the last 14, 15 years, I know as Tony and I have grown and changed, so has what we offer.
Yeah.
So I'm along for the ride.
I love that. That's perfect because it allows room for it to become
Mhm.
the next iteration, and answer more questions and support more people. So that's
Yes.
great. Thank you. Tell us how they can find out about Bold Wives Club. And of course, we're going to have everything in the show notes, but I always find some people are driving. And I think it's really important for everybody to know how to get in touch with you, Alisa, and if they're interested in the program, because just tell us how we can find
Yeah.
it.
Kept it really simple. It's boldwivesclub.com. Super easy. Was so grateful that site was available. That name was available. And, come and check it out. And if you're listening and you've got questions, look, I'm a click away. I'm happy to answer any questions. But more importantly, if this is something that it's on a woman's heart that she needs community, I'd love to have that connection and just go, let's see if this is the right fit for you.
So I'm looking at your site. It's beautiful. So I want everybody to go to boldwivesclub.com, because even if you're listening and you're like, I love the idea of this. I know that this would help Sally and Fran. And I would suggest sharing this with your friends, because I've never seen anything like this out there, and I think it's super important, and it's also very affordable
Mhm.
for what Alisa is giving you. And you can also hear from Alisa how she's just so clear in her delivery and has such a depth of experience and understanding. And also, what I love about you, Alisa, is you don't put brackets on anything. You're not like, this is it and this is how it worked. There's so much room for expansion and growth that I think is what probably makes you. I don't know a lot about your coaching. I know you're a shout out coach in the
Mhm.
marriage community, but I know that that makes you an incredible coach because you don't put a period at the end of any sentence.
Mhm. Well, thank you for that. And, part of the reason too why I don't put any, brackets or constraints on this is I want to hear from the wives that I'm working with. Right.
Mm,
I want to hear from the wives in the community. If somebody says something, I tell them like, this is all just practice for marriage. Say it to me. Practice saying have the hard conversations with me or bringing something up. Let me see if I can find a solution. I can't take on everybody's suggestions, but if it's something that I can, see for the entire community, then we're going to do it.
yeah.
I'm not so married to one idea. I'm only married to Tony. Everything else, everything else is flexible. But I appreciate just all of your kind words and encouragement, your recognition that this is something that is needed,
Yeah.
and your support of what I'm doing that matters a lot.
So the last question I have for you, I have two last questions, and I'm sorry we're going a little over time. So they can join from there, but if they did have a question for you, there isn't a place to contact you on Bold Wives Club. I know we have One Extraordinary Marriage. I
Mhm.
just want to make sure that if anybody did have a question for you, or and anything about it, where could they pose that question?
Yeah, if they just go to Alisa at oneextraordinarymarriage.com, send me an email.
Great,
Send me an email.
great. And then social media wise, what's a great place to follow you?
Everything right now is still being done on One Extraordinary Marriage.
Mhm.
And Instagram is
Great,
where we're at.
great. Is there anything you'd like to say before we end?
I just want to encourage, this is how I close every email. Um, we are brave, we are open minded, we are loving, we are decisive, we are bold.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing all of that.
Mm.
Thank you, everyone. Remember to rate, review, subscribe, and share this podcast. And I loved what everything that Lisa shared because I'm a big believer in this podcast. Who can it be now? It's you. It's always you. And if you put yourself first, this is such a great opportunity to put yourself first in a program like this where you're really taking care of yourself. And therefore, you don't know what you're saying and what you're offering that can help other people as well. So I do hope that you take the opportunity to take a look at Bold Wives Club. And thank you so much. Take care.